I will call the February 28th council meeting to order. Mr. Boyce, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lees, will you call the roll?
Mr. Ayer?
Present.
Mr. Boyce?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. O'Connor? Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz? Mr. Sparks? Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of the executive session memorandum from February 14th, 2023.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the executive session memorandum from February 14th. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0. Approval of the minutes from our February 14th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve our minutes from our February 14th meeting. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0. Approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I would move that we amend the agenda to continue miscellaneous number 5 to our next council meeting. Postpone.
I would
Continue.
second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to amend the agenda to postpone miscellaneous number 5 to our next regular meeting. Hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles.
I would move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All the 6-0. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. I do not have any, but if you would like to speak, there are slips right out there. You can give those to Ms. Lees and speak when the item comes forward. Council committee reports. We have one tonight from the Finance Committee. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met February 23rd. Aaron Peterson, Megan Wiles, and myself. Chuck Haberman discussed the tax abatement for Dahlman Enterprises. And Amy Smith discussed with us an economic development area for Innovation Mile Area Number 2. And Amy also discussed an economic development area tax abatement bond authorization for Bastain Solutions. And we discussed the fiscal actions on our council meeting agenda this evening. That and the claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the claims.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the claims. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0. Previously discussed ordinances. Council to consider ordinance number 3-2-23, an ordinance to reestablish the fire cumulative capital fund tax rate and establishing a public hearing. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller. And as you just described, this is on your agenda for the second time for second reading. So you're somewhat familiar with the issue. And, bottom line, basically what it does is it's a routine process by which we establish, the parameters for the fire cumulative capital fund so that the council has maximum flexibility in setting that rate during the budget process. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding? If not, I will open the public hearing for ordinance number 3-2-23.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles.
seeing no one come forward, I would move that we close the public hearing for ordinance 03-02-23.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to close the public hearing for ordinance number 3-2-23. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Mr. President, I would move to approve ordinance 03-02-23.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 3-2-23. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Ayer?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. New ordinances for discussion. Council to consider ordinance number 08-02-23, an ordinance authorizing the city of Noblesville, Indiana to issue its taxable annual appropriation economic development revenue bonds and approving other actions in respect thereto.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Ms.
Good
Smith?
evening, how are you all? This ordinance is carrying out our obligation to Bastion Solutions based on the economic development agreement that you approved earlier this year. I don't plan to go into project details unless you would like. This ordinance authorizes the issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed $9.5 million with the potential to increase to $10.5 million if it is determined that we have to fund a debt service reserve fund. $9 million would be made available to Bastion Solutions for upfront development costs. The identified repayment source would be tax increment revenue generated from the project. As proposed, we are planning to finance this bond over 25 years with an interest rate not to exceed 7%. The structure of this bond is a city-backed annual appropriation bond. Some of you may recall that this structure is identical to the bonds that were issued for the Campus Center project located across the street from Bastion Solutions. That means every year we have to budget for and appropriate monies in our city budget for that given year. Like with Campus Center, we don't plan to spend those dollars, and that appropriation will be reduced by available TIF revenues from the project. From a timing standpoint, we plan to close by June 1st and are on track to do so. This item was presented to Finance Committee and received a favorable recommendation. Both Adam Sturwald from Barnes & Thornburg, who is bond counsel, and Chad Sweeney from Genovis are both here tonight if you have any questions of either of them. This item does require 2 readings, and we'll be back before you at your March 28th meeting for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or if you have them in the future, you can reach out to me.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Smith?
I think I asked in the Finance Committee, the abatement will not affect, the TIF revenue will still be
Sufficient to cover the debt service. Yes,
Thank you.
our financial consultant partner has determined that that will be sufficient,
Thank you.
or estimates it to be sufficient.
Any other questions? We'll see you in March.
Thanks.
Thank you. Council to consider ordinance number 09-02-23, an ordinance enacting and adopting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances. Ms. Lees.
Move to introduce.
Oh, yes, thank you. I got a second.
Second.
Ms. Lees.
Sleep at the wheel, sorry.
Thank you. This is our routine ordinance that we do every year that formally adopts all the changes that were made to our Code of Ordinances last year. They are put online as they are passed, but this is the formal action you take to adopt that as a whole.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Lees?
Is this something that you would like passed on first reading, or can it be 2?
That would be fine, because it is very routine. So yes, thank you, I appreciate
Mr.
that.
President, then I would move that we suspend the rules and adopt ordinance 09-02-23 on first reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to waive the rules and approve ordinance number 09-02-23 on first reading. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Mr. President, I would move to approve ordinance 09-02-23.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 09-02-23. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is approved.
Thank you. Council to consider ordinance number 10-02-23, an ordinance amending the traffic schedule in Chapter 78 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Noblesville.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Rodewald.
Good evening. Andrew Rodewald, Project Manager, Engineering Department. Before you is update to traffic code ordinance, the various traffic schedules. The vast majority of these are routine updates from new construction, new subdivisions, so the intersection control of those, speed limits for those, as well as some updates for various speeds we found that were inconsistent with signage. There's some updates to parking schedules. Most of those are in the downtown area that were changes during construction of Levinson and the county garage. So this is reenacting previous. There are no changes to any of the 2-hour parking that was there. It's just putting it back into the proper place in the tables so that it's enforceable now. I believe that would cover the vast majority of those. So if there are any particular questions?
Any questions for Mr. Rodewald?
Is this something you would also like to have passed on first reading?
Yes, please.
Mr. President, I would move that we waive the rules and approve ordinance 10-02-23 on the first reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to waive the rules and approve ordinance number 10-2-23 on first reading. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles.
I would move that we approve ordinance number 10-02-23 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 10-2-23. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Boyd?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is approved.
Thank you. Miscellaneous number 1, council to consider resolution RC-12-23, a resolution approving 1, a declaratory resolution and economic development plan of the redevelopment commission establishing allocation area number 2 of the Innovation Mile Economic Development Area, and 2, the order of the plan commission related thereto. Ms. Smith.
Good evening again. Before you is a resolution, which is one of many steps in creating a TIF district. This resolution is proposing to create a second allocation area within Innovation Mile to capture the new AV from the joint replacement project. And you can see in green, that's where the joint replacement will go. This will be the new allocation area. This in turn allows us to fund debt service and future anticipated infrastructure costs within Innovation Mile. It did go to finance and received a favorable recommendation, and I'm happy to answer questions you may have, and I ask for your approval tonight.
Any questions for Ms. Smith?
Mr. President, I would move to approve resolution RC-12-23.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution RC-12-23. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0. Council to consider resolution RC-13-23, a resolution approving 1, a declaratory resolution and economic development plan of the redevelopment commission establishing the Bastion Solutions Economic Development Area, and 2, the order of the plan commission related thereto. Ms. Smith.
Good evening. This resolution is another step in carrying out the commitments of the Economic Development Agreement for the Bastion Solutions Project. This resolution, again, is one of the multiple steps in setting up a new TIF district. This district is specific to the Bastion Solutions Project and will allow us to capture the increment both from real property and personal property investment and pay off the debt from the bond that we discussed just a little bit ago. Procedurally speaking, we'll be wrapping up with the RDC at their March 16th meeting with a confirmatory resolution and a public hearing. This was also discussed at Finance Committee and received a favorable recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
This project takes from 2 other TIF districts currently, or allocation areas?
It does. This parcel is currently in Central 146th Street, and these parcels are in Corporate Campus West.
And working with our consultant, it was that will not affect those 2?
Correct.
districts?
They reviewed that and determined that that would not have an adverse effect on those other areas.
Any other questions for Ms. Smith? Not, can I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve resolution RC-13-23 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution RC-13-23. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0. Miscellaneous number 3, council to consider resolution RC-14-23, a declaratory resolution designating an economic revitalization area, and and tax abatement with Bastion Solutions and establishing a public hearing. Ms. Smith?
Good evening again. Again, sticking with the Bastion Solutions incentive package pursuant to the approved agreement, this item before you is the first step in approving a tax abatement for the project for the benefit of Bastion Solutions. This incentive includes both real and personal property abatement. In addition, this also establishes the project site as an economic revitalization area for tax abatement purposes and establishes a public hearing for your meeting on March 28th. This resolution was presented to Finance Committee and comes with a favorable recommendation. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Smith?
Mr. President, I would move to approve Resolution RC 1423.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve Resolution RC-14-23. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Thank you
Mr.
very
President, I
much.
would move to establish a public hearing for the March 28th meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to establish a public hearing for the March 28th meeting. This is also a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Sorry, I cut off your thank you.
Miscellaneous number 4, council to consider resolution RC-15-23, a confirmatory resolution designating an economic revitalization area for Dahlman Enterprises LLC. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, President Smith, members of council. Andrew Murray, Economic Development Director for the record, covering for Assistant Director Haberman, who is celebrating his birthday today and tonight with his family. Happy birthday, Chuck. But this is a carryover item from your last meeting to which there have been no changes. But ultimately, this is a resolution confirming the final step in granting the real property tax abatement for Best Equipment Company relocating their headquarters to Noblesville. So we discussed this with Chairman Davis, comes to you with a favorable recommendation from this council's finance committee. And then we are scheduled for a public hearing to which it has been properly advertised. Following that hearing, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Murray?
This is real and personal property?
Just real.
Thank you.
This is a matter of public hearing, so I will open the public hearing for resolution RC-15-23.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
seeing no one come forward, I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to close the public hearing for resolution RC-15-23. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve Resolution RC-15-23 as presented.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution RC-15-23. This is also a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6-0. We've come to the end of our meeting. Any comments from the council? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.